Growing up in South Louisiana, I couldn't wait to go just about anywhere else. Preferably someplace with mountains. It's just so flat here. So flat, in fact, that I'm convinced that the flatness has made us all a little afraid of hills. Notice this the next time that you drive over any high overpass or bridge in this area, there's always a ton of traffic going up the overpass, and then it suddenly opens up on the other side. It's like everybody's slowly approaching the top, because we don't know what's on the other side of that hill. We need to be suspicious and cautious. But I wanted hills, or anything really that just wasn't, well, here. I never understood why people stayed, or why after they went away, they come back. Until I finally got my chance to go away. We hadn't been in Swanee, Tennessee for 6 months when I went to seminary, on a mountain no less, before I could not wait to come home. Hills, it turns out, are very hard to walk up. And mountains wear out your tires and your brakes really fast. And it's cold. And y'all, the food is terrible everywhere else. Everywhere. No spice whatsoever. And the people just weren't the same. Louisiana was home, I realized. I love it here. And I wanted to come home. Funny thing was, people in Tennessee felt the same way about Tennessee. And I couldn't imagine why. But they loved it there. They wanted to be there on purpose. Guess it was their home. The places we know and love are funny. They can take a hold of us. And that hold can be good, and that hold can be bad. There are two places worth exploring in the readings that we've heard today, and they both belong to the same region, Nazareth and Jerusalem. Both are in what we call the Holy Land, but they're both very different from one another, yet also very similar. Nazareth today is a thriving city. It's the largest Arab-Israeli city in the modern state of Israel, meaning that the population are mostly Palestinian Arabs who are citizens of the state of Israel. Very big, bustling place. But back in Jesus' time, Nazareth was a little backwater town. We're talking a few hundred people, maybe. You might remember when Nathanael said, "What good can come from Nazareth?" That's why. It was a little backwater. He's kind of revealing his own prejudice when he says this. Jerusalem, on the other hand, is a sprawling capital city, then and now. It's a center of governmental, economic, and religious life. Now, 2 Samuel introduces us to Jerusalem for the first time as the capital city chosen by King David in just a very few short verses that are even left out of the reading that you just heard. David chooses Jerusalem, he conquers it, he takes it from the Jebusites and makes it the capital. Boom, that's it. And you think a city with such a story in our minds surrounding it would warrant a better or more fleshed out backstory in Scripture. But no, 5 verses or less. That's it. That's how Jerusalem is introduced into the story. And the funny thing about it is a terrible place to choose for a capital when you think about it. It is in the middle of a desert, almost literally in the middle of nowhere. There is no easily accessible water source at all. They have to pipe or truck it in now. It has no military value because it's in the middle of a valley. And despite all of this, it has become the most sacred place on earth. A troubled city with a troubled past, yet it is teeming with life. The psalmist sang about it in the psalm we read together. This beloved city and her holy hill called Zion, beautiful and lofty, the joy of all the earth is the hill of Zion, the very center of the world and the city of the great King. Cities, places can be beloved. It's why we can sing songs like, "Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans?" Beloved places that can also be troubled places. Jesus' hometown of Nazareth shows itself to be a troubled place when he returns home. It's troubled in that its residents, the people that he grew up around can't seem to see past their own noses. Jesus begins teaching in the local synagogue, and people say, well, where did this man get all this? What's this wisdom he's been given? What about the powerful acts accomplished through him? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't he Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And Mark says they were repulsed by him and fell into sin. And their sin is unbelief about the good that he is doing, which becomes an obstacle to their relationship with God. As one writer puts it, the human capacity for investing in social norms, for believing in one's own preferences, is greater than the human capacity for faith. And that's something we all have to be cautious of. At play here, I think, is the possibility for a couple of mistakes. One is not hearing voices from outside our frame of reference because we let our own prejudices and preconceived notions get in the way. The mistake of thinking that we have it all together, of underestimating others, thinking we have nothing more to learn from them, or in spiritual terms, thinking we know all about God, who God is, and how God works. The borders of my life and of this town are just fine. Everything within these walls are just fine. Thank you very much. Another possible mistake is like it, but from the other way around. It's the mistake that I made as a younger man, always looking to the horizon, always thinking there's got to be a better place out there than right here, and then discovering how much the place that I'd come from had given me. That sin is to forget that a little backwater town is what gave Christ to the world, that a worthless clump of desert became the seat of God's presence in creation. Our capacity for imagination may be limited, but God's is not. To think otherwise is a form of unbelief. God's work does not require much on our part at all, really, except openness to possibilities. As our nation celebrates Independence Day today, I believe that these two sins are two sides of the same coin that are always a great danger for us as a country. One is to think we have it all together, that we are the greatest nation on earth, and therefore we've nothing to learn and nothing to reflect on. To see our humble beginnings and meteoric rise as the evidence of divine favor, and therefore everything we do is always right. Keep listening to the story of David as we continue these readings from 2 Samuel in the coming weeks, and see if this doesn't become David's mistake and downfall. The other sin is to see only our vices without being able to name any of our virtues, to think that scrapping the whole enterprise is the only way forward. In good Anglican fashion, perhaps the answer is somewhere more in the middle. To be able to celebrate our virtues as well as reflect deeply on our failures and actively seek to remedy them. Of being able to learn from others and not believe that we and only we have all the answers. This is what the entire Bible is about, in a way, especially the Old Testament. Israel rising to power, forgetting herself, being reminded of her failures, and having to come back to God, and then doing it again and again and again. And what about us as individuals? We all follow this similar pattern. I see it with people at all kind of different stages of spiritual development. People new to the Episcopal Church or new to Christianity in general are full of questions. They are open, they want to learn, they are eager to grow, they're excited. And after a while, though, that enthusiasm can wane, which is totally understandable. It's not unlike any relationship, where the fire burns hot at the beginning, like striking a match, and then it calms to a steady burn after a while. It's the steady burn or the dimming of the flame that is that whole other stage. People who've been a part of the faith in that stage for a long time will sometimes come to me and say, I want to grow in my spiritual life. I say, great, that's exciting. Yet I find that sometimes they're disappointed when I point them to what seems a little too familiar. Daily prayer, daily study of Scripture, practices outside of just coming to church. They want something new and exciting. And those things are not only familiar, they sound like work. It's not unlike the fad diets and workout routines that exist in myriad numbers. Maybe one of those programs will get you started down the path, but most people who stick with it realize that to be fit and to lose weight, the formula is pretty familiar. Eat right, exercise regularly. It's what my doctor tells me every time I go in for a checkup. But that sounds like work. In terms of spirituality, there's really no replacement for regular weekly church attendance in a community, combined with regular daily study of Scripture and regular daily prayer in a way that works for you. At the same time, that doesn't mean that there aren't other spiritual practices. There are many. It's all in how open you are and to allowing God into these practices, whatever they may be. The keys, I think, really are balance and openness. Balance in recognizing that just because something is familiar does not mean that it doesn't have something to teach us. Balance of recognizing that just because something is unfamiliar does not mean it doesn't have something to teach us. What's required in either scenario is openness. Openness to the possibility that God can and does speak to us through everyone and everything. Openness to the possibility that I am likely dead wrong about some stuff and need to change my heart and life. Openness to believe that if God can take a worthless plot of desert and make it into the most sacred place on earth, then God certainly has the power to do something with me and the people around me and the ground beneath my very feet. All I have to do is be open to the possibility.